Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Misery. Hope you're doing fine. And we're at chapter 14, Dragon Lady. Here we go. On his way back through the sitting room, he stopped to pick up the album. He was curious to see photographs of Annie's family and of Annie herself when she was younger. When he opened the album, however, he found that it was full of stories cut from newspapers. The first two pages told of the wedding of Annie's parents and the birth of her elder brother Paul. Yes, another Paul in her life, and of Annie herself. She was born on April 1st, 1943. She must have hated being an April Fool. The next page contained a report of a fire in a house in Bakersfield, California, in 1954. 5 people had died in the fire. 3 of them had been the children who lived in the ground floor apartment downstairs from the Wilkes family, who had been out of the house at the time. The fire had started because of a cigarette in the cellar. Annie's voice echoed in Paul's mind. God, I hated those children. Paul's blood began to run cold. But she was only 11 years old. That's old enough to let a candle burn down in the cellar so the flame could light a pool of petrol. It's an old trick, but hard to beat. Maybe she just wanted to frighten them and accidentally did more than that. But she did it. Paul, you knew she did it. He turned the page and found a story about the death of Annie's father. He had fallen over a pile of clothes at the top of the stairs in his house and broken his neck. The newspaper called it a curious accident. On the next page, a newspaper from Los Angeles, hundreds of miles from Bakersfield, used exactly the same words. A curious accident. This time, it was a student nurse who had fallen over a dead cat at the top of the stairs and broken her neck. The name of the person who shared the student's apartment was Annie Wilkes. The year was 1959. Paul felt pure terror rise up in him. The accidents had happened in different places at different times, and no one had made the connection. Why would they? People were always falling downstairs. Why had she killed him? He seemed to hear Annie's answers in his mind. The answers were absolutely mad, and Paul knew they were right. I killed her because she played the radio too late. I killed her because she let her boyfriend kiss her too much. I killed her because I caught her cheating. I killed her because she caught me cheating. I killed her to see whether I could. What does it matter? She was just a Miss Clever. So I killed her. The next page of the album showed that Annie had graduated as a nurse and had got a job at St. Joseph's Hospital in Pennsylvania. There followed several pages containing short newspaper reports of deaths at the hospital. There was nothing suspicious about any of these deaths. Most of the people were old and had been ill for a long time. Some were young, one was even a child. But they all had serious illness or injuries. And what were these reports doing in Annie's album? She had killed them all. The reports were so short that several could fit on a single page of the album, and the album was thick. Again, Paul asked the question, why Annie? Why kill these people? Again, he heard Annie's voice echoing in his mind, because they were rats in a trap. And he remembered Annie's tears falling on the rat she held in her hand, while she said, poor thing, Over the next few years, she had moved from hospital to hospital around the country. The pattern in the album was always the same. First, the list of new hospital staff with Annie's name among them, then page of short reports of deaths. In 1978, 9 years ago, she had arrived at a hospital in Denver, Colorado. The usual pattern began again with reports of the death of an elderly woman. Then the pattern changed. Instead of reports of deaths, there was a report of Annie's marriage to a man called Ralph Dugan, a doctor. There was a photograph of the house he had bought outside Sidewinder in 1997. This house. Several months had passed without any killings. It was unbelievable, but Annie must have been happy. Then there was a report from August 1980 of their divorce. It is clear that he had divorced her rather than the other way around. He had understood something about her. Maybe he had seen the cat at the top of the stairs, the one he was supposed to fall over. Annie had torn into this report with a pen as she wrote vicious words across it, so that Paul had difficulty reading it. Annie moved to a hospital in Boulder, Colorado. It was clear that she was hurt, very angry, because the killings started again, more often than before. The newspaper reports came every few days. God, how many did she kill? Why did nobody guess? At last, in 1982, Annie made a mistake. She moved to the childbirth department of the hospital. Annie had carefully kept a record of the whole story. Killing newborn babies is different from killing badly injured and seriously ill adults. Babies don't often die, and people notice it if they do. Parents care as well, and Annie had started to kill even healthy babies. They must have all seemed to her to be poor things by now that she was even crazier than before. 5 babies died between January and March 1982. A hospital investigation found nothing suspicious in their deaths, which was not surprising, thought Paul, which Annie was the chief nurse of the department and was probably doing the investigation herself. Another baby had died in April, 2 in May. Then at the beginning of June, there was a newspaper report with the heading, "Nurse Wilkes questions on baby deaths." The police were reported as saying that she was not under arrest, and they were not accusing her of anything. They were just questioning her. And the next day, Nurse Wilkes released. She had got away with it. How? Paul couldn't imagine, but she had got away with it. Now he thought she will move to another hospital in another town, but no, she was too insane for that now. The Boulder News, 2nd of July. The horror continues. 3 more babies die. Pages and pages of the album contained reports of Annie's arrests and trial. Annie had also included a selection of letters from the citizens of Boulder that had been printed in the newspapers. It was clear that she had chosen the most vicious of the letters, those which reminded her that everyone was against her and that it was their fault. The newspapers began to call her the Dragon Lady. But there was not enough evidence. On December 16th, the huge heading in the paper read, "Dragon Lady Innocent." There were plenty more pages in the album, but few of them had been used. Annie had kept any further reports that she had seen about the baby deaths. But there were no more killings until 1984. The Sidewinder Gazette had reported in November of that year the discovery of the body of a young man called Andrew Pomeroy. what was left of his body. Some bits had been cut out with an axe, had been found in a stream bed quite a few miles from the town. How far from here? Paul wondered. He turned the page and looked at the last report in the album. For a moment, his breath stopped. It was about him. The report was only 2 weeks old. It had been cut out from the Newsweek and told how famous novelist Paul Sheldon, last seen 7 weeks ago in Boulder, Colorado, was missing. The reporter had interviewed Paul's agent, but she had not been worried. Probably because she thought Paul was staying with a woman he had met. Well, that was true, thought Paul. He put the album down carefully so that Annie would not see that it had been moved. He felt sick and close to tears. Outside, the wind suddenly blew heavy rain against the house, and Paul jumped into fear. An hour later, full of novel, the wind seemed comforting rather than frightening. He was thinking, there's no way out. You can't escape, and Superman's too busy making films in Hollywood. But there's only one thing you can do. Can you, Paul? Can you do it? The only way out of this was to kill her. Yes, I can. And that was the end of chapter 14, The Dragon Lady. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Chapter 15, Butcher's Knife. Thank you. Bye-bye.